Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to talk about energy, the economy, and middle school math that just doesn't add up, right? No, it sounds ridiculous, but just bear with me here. So first, let's talk about energy. Okay, what do we use energy for? We use energy for many, many things. For example, food. Getting food, giving food light if we're growing it indoors, fueling the transportation needs on delivering food in different places, even the machinery that we use for farming nowadays, clean water for the plants, and so we use energy for all kinds of stuff for foods. Now, water, clean drinking water. Water is becoming more and more scarce, but one thing we have a lot of, for example, is ocean water. We can't drink ocean water, but the desalinization process is very energy intensive. So if energy was made more abundant and more affordable, then clean drinking water would not be a problem. So the distillation and cleaning of drinking water. Things like housing are also very energy dependent. And then we can talk about like the materials that it takes to make the houses. So the plyboards and the metals and the drywall and all this kind of stuff. We can talk about the tools and the labor used, right? That all is energy. And then we could even talk about, like, I guess for lack of a better term, other materials and or ways to fix things up and maintain houses and stuff like that. And last but not least, and maybe the most obvious, is transportation. Right? The fuel for transportation and the materials needed in order to build the planes, trains, and automobiles that we all use today. All right? So energy is a pretty important part of our everyday life. Now, before we get into anything too heavy, I need to go over a couple of terms as well. Finite, infinite, and exponential growth. So when we talk about something that is infinite, there's an infinite amount of something. It means that there's no limit to it. Right? And so if we're talking about an infinite source of energy like the sun, there's no limit to the amount of energy that the sun puts off. Right? It's limitless, essentially. And I think the same could be argued that wind and currents and things of that nature, right, it's similar. When we talk about something that's finite, like if there's a finite amount of stuff, that means that there is a limit to it. And a perfect example of this is fossil fuels. Right? If you think about what fossil fuels are, basically it's old dead stuff, right? A dinosaur fell over and died, or a tree fell over and died, and eventually it becomes oil, right? And so there's a finite amount of that. It's not limitless. There's a certain amount that will run out eventually, right? And we can argue about when and how much there is, but there's a limit to it, right? And the last term I want to go over is exponential growth. And this just means rapid growth over time and space, right? So something x to the second power, x to the fourth power, x to the sixth power. And population density tends to grow like this. All right, so what does all of this mean? Well, this is where we get into the math that just doesn't add up. We as a society have based our entire society on an 8th grade algebraic expression that doesn't equal out. An exponentially growing need of a finite amount of resources. Let me say that again. We have an exponentially growing need of energy based on a finite amount of resources. This does not equal up. So this is problematic because eventually we're going to run out. But in the short term, what this does is it empowers the folks that have control over that finite amount of resources to kind of do whatever they want. I mean, as far as economics are concerned, the price of housing, food, water, transportation, but even more insidious, I guess I could say, is that they have the power to then kind of create social norms, meaning they have the power to create what is and what isn't acceptable, right? What does it mean to be a 40-hour work week, or why do we call it a 40-hour work week, which used to be bigger, it's getting bigger now, right? What does it mean to be a man or a woman? What does it mean to be considered an American or any other part of any other nation state? And so when people have this amount of power, enables them to kind of manipulate how society runs and works. So what I suggest is that it might be more useful to base an exponentially growing need on an infinite amount of resources, an infinite amount of energy. And so this, yes, I'm talking about things like solar. I'm talking about things like wind and current electricity. And what this does is empowers the folks, your average everyday people who need access to housing, food, water, and transportation, right? Because all of a sudden it takes the ability to control that finite amount of resources out of the hands of the few and brings energy in a way that the many can have access to it. And this isn't a perfect situation, right? I mean, we could talk about the mining practices for things like the materials for solar panels and batteries, and they're terrible and they're irresponsible, dirty, but we can fix that, right? And for example, where are we going to get the money? We could stop subsidizing fossil fuel industry to the tune of $1 trillion a year, just from the United States. I think I read in 2022. Yeah, we gave taxpayer subsidies to fossil fuel industries in the United States over $1 trillion in 2022. Imagine if we spent that $1 trillion on new innovative ways to improve battery storage and improve solar panel technology, and to clean and make more responsible the mining for the materials necessary to make some of these, the solar panels and the conduits. And this is another thing. While we do still need natural resources in order to build the conduits, so the things like the turbines, the things like the solar panels, this is not the same as needing fossil fuels or the materials to produce the energy itself. A solar panel is just the conductor, right? It's the thing that produces the electricity, but the power, the energy is coming from the sun in that instance. And so you have this infinite energy source that's running through these finite sources instead of being the source itself, right? And so I argue that it is quite different. And so again, I'm not suggesting this is end all be all, but I do think it's a useful lens in order to look at our economy and realize that we've based it off of a simple 8th grade algebraic expression that does not equal out. All right, well, thanks for listening. Have a good day.